defines formats like Modern and Pauper, no other colour defines the Commander format quite like green. Giant stompy creatures, efficient card draw engines, and at times almost ludicrous ramping abilities. Green has all the traits of battlecruiser magic. But does this endless supply of power balance with the flavour of the colour, or is green, as many players would argue, just a little bit too pushed? Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things magic, design, flavour and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello. Oh dear, good start.
Oh, good start.
Hello, Nathan Cancel here.
I had the bad start last week and now it's you. Cool, alright, so we are here to cap off our Colour Pie series, Nathan. We've done all the colours, white, blue, black, red, now we are doing green. Indeed. And have we really saved the best colour till last?
I think in the current climate, I think so. I think that green's probably one of the most solid colours going throughout like the entirety of the years of Magic in terms of identity. I think its identity is very easy. I think its power level might be up for a bit more question in terms of like how consistently it's remained either ahead of the curve or behind the curve.
Sure.
I think there was a point in Magic about 10 years ago or so, where there was an issue with green lacking in the same kind of way that the white's viewed to be lacking now. And I think that over the last decade, it's not only picked up a lot of different like design spaces to be able to shore it up, but also I think the main issue going forward is that creatures have become a lot more powerful over the last 26 years, and green is the colour that will take the best advantage of that inherently by being the creature colour. I
mean, is it like how I've just said about it being the Commander format? Do you think the fact that it's Commander has a big thing to do with green's kind of perceived power level? Because it doesn't seem to be in sort of 60 card formats. It doesn't seem to be any more dominant at any one time than any other colour, unless it's maybe, say, paired up with blue, like blue-green, or like Jund, which is obviously a classic sort of mainstay. But you wouldn't necessarily see that like mono-green decks are any more powerful than, say, mono-red decks or whatever else.
Yeah, I guess like the interesting thing is now we're back at Theros. If you look back at the first Theros block and how there was a Devotion deck for each of the colours, and as much as Black Devotion was very powerful, and the Blue Devotion was a very clever tempo archetype. Green Devotion was also very powerful. I think Green Devotion ended up moving into having like one of the stalliest standard seasons in a long time, where you just had these decks just going wide against each other until the end of days. I think that's harder to argue because I think the black deck technically was the best one, but that's Pack Rat being exceptionally strong. But I think green in general, like by itself, it kind of, I don't think it struggles too much to be a monocolour. I think it lacks in certain things like direct removal. And it's more prone to being undermined through like board wipes and stuff like that. But obviously, every strategy has its foils.
Sure. Well, like with every other colour, what we've been doing is that obviously we can just look at the mechanics or whatever else, but that's not really what we do on this podcast. We talk about its flavour. So with every colour, we've been looking down at its kind of core beliefs, its core tenets, and seeing how that affects things through the cardboard, and whether these colours really are expressed in a way that we think is in keeping with what our ideas of what the colour are, or whether maybe what we think of what the colour does or doesn't do is actually wrong, and that when we're looking at Alpha, the first set, or maybe most recently, what was it, Core 2020 we've been looking at?
If you're looking at core sets,
Yeah, core sets, which kind of give a nice little broad spectrum of what the colours do and don't do, whether the colours are actually trying to behave in a certain way that we as players maybe don't give them enough credit for, right? So like when we spoke about white, we kind of thought that when we're talking about Commander, white wasn't actually any good, or at least that's the perception. But really what it's trying to do, like things like mass land removal and all this kind of thing, and board wipes and all that kind of theme, actually it did very well. It's just the fact that people perceived those strategies as not being viable, and so white doesn't really get a lot of a look in. So when we look at green, the perception maybe is, especially in EDH, which is obviously the format which we kind of come with our viewpoint from, is that green is actually maybe just a little bit too good. Like maybe it does a little bit too much. Well, I mean, is that fair enough to say?
Well, I think that's absolutely fair to say. I think the whole point about white's hang-ups is that the things that it does well don't necessarily scale very well in a 4-player, 40 life per player kind of game. Sure. Same in the same kind of way that red can have hang-ups in its limitation and damage dealing and things like that. Like its spells don't necessarily translate into a multiplayer format quite so well, whereas a lot of the things that green does, like especially like mana ramp and card draw, are the two pillars of EDH. I mean, any format particularly, but specifically in EDH, trying to keep up with card advantage and mana production is very, very important.
Yeah, especially as if you've got, say, 4 people sat around a table and you have the potential to do things on each of their turns, like, say, with instant effects or flash effects or, just whenever, any card that says whenever a player does this or whenever an opponent does that, something that gets scaled up wildly. And I think green does have quite a few of those effects.
What about Seaborn Muse, for example?
Seaborn Muse, yeah,
Suddenly
it's a classic example.
You're taking 4 turns for everyone else as well. So yeah, I think obviously untap effects are something that sit in green quite well. I mean, you do have Unwinding Clock for artifacts, which can give you like a way to lean into that. But I mean, yeah, green mana production is exceptionally good. And I think, especially since the creatures, because it tends to have a bigger and it tends to utilize its late game better anyway.
Yeah.
So if EDH is the kind of format where you want to be playing a bit more battle cruisery, you want to be throwing out big 8 drops and that kind of thing, green is very well equipped to do that already.
Yeah, sure. All right, cool. Well, let's just jump into it then. So you've once again come out with a fantastic outline as what we're going to talk about. So let's just jump into it then. What are green's key tropes, flavorfully?
Well, obviously, I've realised I've written this. I haven't actually put down that. Obviously, it's about nature.
Yeah, sure.
It is a tree on the mana symbol, and more than any of the other colours, it tends to be a little bit more focused in nature, where the land that it comes from.
Yeah.
I think as much as you could say that goblins care about mountains, I don't think necessarily goblins care about their mountains as much as the shamans and the druids care about the plant life and the nature around them. And obviously, they live typically like green characters will live more symbiotically with their natural surroundings and have a closer affinity to the land, which when you draw your mana from the land.
Well, I was thinking about this today, because if the idea of, so flavorfully speaking, I mean, this gets contradicted just like any kind of soft magic system does in fancy sort of media, but the way that mana is produced in Magic the Gathering in the storyline is it's channeled through ley lines, which are literally lines of mana that travel through the earth. So if you're the colour of nature and pulling power from the earth, you're going to have a greater affinity for those ley lines. When you look at planeswalkers like Nissa Ravine, she is literally the ley line planeswalker.
If you look at what she was able to do at the end of the Zendikar, Return to Zendikar block, like the fact she was able to channel all of the energy of... She basically harness the entirety of the plane. Obviously, she had a direct contact with the world soul, which helps considerably.
Well, yeah, but again, that's a very green thing, right? Yeah. Like, there are world souls and sort of soul of Innistrad or soul of New Phyrexia, whatever. Like, these creatures exist across different colour spectrums, but generally, always speaking, they're always sort of earthbound, right? I mean, you look at the next sort of story arc which came after the Zendikar was the Return to Innistrad. So you had Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon. She imprisoned I'm blanking on the Eldrazi.
Emrakul. That was Tamio.
Oh, Tamio,
where she was able to
use ley lines.
Ability,
to trap.
Yeah, Emrakul did some tricky nonsense at the end.
I mean,
of that
sure,
block.
but you need a green mage to do this. Right?
If anything, like ostensibly, like Nissa is probably one of the most powerful out of the Gatewatch. I mean, it's arguable to Liliana's
Chain Veil.
Yeah, if I say take the Chain Veil out of it, I'm not entirely sure where she sits in terms of like. If you had a top trump card of what her like power rating.
Yeah, sure. It's hard to see Liliana without the Chain Veil.
Yeah, and then this is much more like as I said if she can get into contact with the world soul and have a plane that has like heightened mana confluences and that kind of thing, she will be exceptionally powerful because she can just channel all of it straight through her.
So then it kind of stands to reason then that green should be amongst the most powerful cards, especially in a kind of a long sort of 10-15 turn format like EDH, because it's right there in the flavour.
Oh yeah,
right?
Exactly, right? It kind of works directly with the game and the way that you're trying to build it. I mean, realistically, the whole point for EDH was get your mana up and play big dumb stuff. And I think that's pretty much the Timmy approach that green tends to have anyway.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there we go. So it's the colour of nature. It's the colour of, like, producing this kind of natural magic, which I think mana is kind of meant to be representative of. Yeah.
Yeah, so then if you... so the thing, like, ethically or morally or however you want to put it, green kind of it champions the natural order of things.
Yeah, sure.
The natural system that life works with. If you look at, say, the Golgari swarm, from Ravnica, they obviously the black-green tribe, and that is almost like a direct parallel to the idea of the green is the life side and black is the death side, which is a natural process. And green by itself already has this idea of not wanting to change the world, not really wanting to upset the balance or the way that things are naturally progressing. It's a complete foil to blue, which looks to innovate, adapt, and advance things, whereas green's kind of pretty happy with everything going on its natural course.
Sure, I mean that's a good sort of comparison with the Golgari Swarm, but I think you could even do it with all the other green guilds in Ravnica. They all have their own sort of version of what is a natural state of being, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the Gruul, their green-red, their natural state of being is to smash society because kind of a natural survival of the fittest is better.
Yeah.
If you look at the Simic, they're always trying to improve upon nature, but it's always, at least for a lot of the Simic in the guild, it's to do with keeping sort of a natural progression of
evolution.
things. You're just giving nature like that kind of push, if you like.
Yeah.
And the Selesnians are all about being in harmony with nature and kind of cultivating something from the lessons which nature gives you. So green, I think, is a very dominant philosophy of it being. You're right. There doesn't seem to be many morals in green. It's not like saying that one thing is bad or good. If it's the natural way, it's the natural way, and that can change from plane to plane. It can change from species to species, race to race. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to describe green. Yeah, sure. It's the natural way.
Yeah, it's almost like, so look, having just had Theros Beyond Death with having Clothis being the red-green god, and the fact that she's tied to destiny specifically, like this works into that idea of natural order and how the world is supposed to work a certain way, and that's why she has green in her. And the raiders, obviously, the fact that she's doing she does it with a pardon me. And the fact that she does it with an iron fist, is the way I like to think of it. She lays down the law without any cares to the whims of others, because this is the way that things should be.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, if you're looking at the terms of like land and mana production, it has a lot of things like that you add, like fertile ground, and things like that when you add it's enchantments that you put on the lands that helps them tap for even more mana. Obviously you have cards like Rampant Growth, which cultivate, Kadama's Reach, all of these cards that directly take lands from your deck, put them into your hand or into play. Skyshroud Claim. I mean, the list goes on ad nauseum, but if it's not just the colour of lands, it's also the colour of creatures. Obviously every colour has creatures, but green's creatures tend to be a little bit beefier, a little bit more wild,
kind of fit into that beast trope,
beastly,
right?
exactly. Yeah. I mean, we'll look at some of the key creature types, and beast has been one of the key ones for green going throughout the entirety of Magic, even back like with the Carvus, whereas now beasts are a little bit more ubiquitous and a little.
I mean,
bit
I don't know. I don't really like beast as a creature type. If I'm honest with you, it does seem a little bit ambiguous.
Yeah, it does.
Like everything's a beast.
Out, yeah. Well, if you look at like the Typhon from the latest Theros set, it's a snake beast.
Yeah,
and it kind of just is that little.
Could it just not be a snake giant?
It's like cat beast. Aren't cats beasts already?
Yeah, I guess it kind of adds this more sort of feral aspect to it,
course,
so it kind of removes any sort of like cultural civilization from a creature,
domestication,
which is kind of nice actually.
Yeah.
I think it's often seen if you create Beast Within creates a 3/3 beast, like, and all the creature tokens for Beast Within can be a myriad of different beast tokens.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, there are two different artworks, and both of them are very different.
I mean, the Espericing one, which I think is the one which most people are probably familiar with, has the token, again by Espericing, which goes along with the card art, which is kind of cool.
That's good.
But again, it was just, I think the art direction was just going, oh yes, but we want you to kind of draw whatever.
Yeah, and they always tend to also be green, which is weird.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they should be green because it's natural camouflage to their surroundings. There we go. That makes sense biologically.
Sure. I guess they had to give the beast token a colour, because it couldn't just be the colour is whatever colour the creature was that you destroyed with Beast Within, which would actually be more thematic.
Yeah.
Unless they're saying that every single thing that gets hit with a Beast Within, because it's the Beast Within, literally has some embodiment of green within their persona.
Or it's just that one beast. That one beast is within everything.
It's just with everyone. That's canon now.
Yeah.
That Espericing beast, literally, that's the biology of all races in Magic. Is they
like
have
deep
that
down, they are just a beast. Yeah.
Like some kind of like unifying alien species.
Yeah, I love the I'm trying to think of a strain like claustrophobia or something, like an enchantment where out of nowhere, oh no, the claustrophobia. You know what that is at heart? It's a beast.
It's a beast. I like that. Well, that's now canon, so that's cool.
Fantastic, good. We'll write to Wizards.
Alison Lurs, make sure you're listening, and Ethan Fleischer if you're there. Sure,
fantastic. So it likes to look to live in the moment. It doesn't really care necessarily about the future. Obviously, that's for things like blue to care about. And it's not necessarily not looking at the past, because it likes to look at the ancestry of where it came from, of what, biologically made it up, where it's the history of. I mean, the thing about druids and hermits and people like that is that they tend to want to lose the shackles of all like not modern life necessarily.
Sure, well, no, yeah, I think the trappings of
society
kind of get in the way.
Yeah, because it was supposed to be like your natural way of being with nature and with the. I mean, townsfolk. I mean, this is the difference between the way that green creatures and white creatures work. Is that white creatures work towards a community, whereas green creatures work towards harmony. But it's not necessarily like a direct community. Like wolves and birds and all this nonsense. They can cohabit in an ecosystem without necessarily. Obviously, you get prey and predators within certain creature dynamics, but for the most part, they do live in harmony in a sustained ecosystem. And a lot of what white and blue, and to a lesser extent red and green and red and black do, is that they kind of mess with that a little bit.
Yeah,
they usually either seek to change it and manipulate it to their own means, to directly subvert it through direct technological advancement, or to kind of misunderstand the point a little bit. Like, I can see why people found it difficult to mix Clothis with the red part, because the in our minds red is just angry. It's hateful,
sure.
And it doesn't necessarily. But then there are a lot of shamans still in red, and they still speak to the elements of nature, and elementals as well, being between blue, red, and green, kind of shows that natural. You don't get as many white or black elementals.
No, that's true. I think, the red part, because Gruul as a colour pairing, the red-green colour pairing, does always seem quite natural. You get these colour pairings throughout Magic, which you kind of think some of them just seem to be a little bit more smooth than others in terms of what they're trying to do.
Some a bit more forced.
Gruul is definitely one of the ones which definitely seems a lot smoother. And I think a lot to do with that is the idea that if you're thinking about something that's bestial, or if you think about something that's, raw and primal, you're not only thinking just of, it's in its natural state, but usually natural state, as far as we as like modern humans with a society understands it, is about sort of aggression and about natural selection.
Yeah.
And the only way that kind of really happens in the world is, unfortunately, even if you like your fluffy bunnies and you like your cute deer, is that they kill the fuck out of each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And they eat each other.
Yeah, the reality of Pokemon
shag everything that moves.
Yeah, the reality of Pokemon's really scary. And and then you translate that into the real one. It's like, you eat chicken every day. Try and go out and actually throttle one for yourself.
Kill a chicken.
And see how hard it is, honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's terrible.
Obviously, like, green has this kind of idea of being quite aggressive and stuff, but there is also quite a gentle side to green. I think
it balances this tranquility that it kind of has, this serenity that it kind of, as much as nature can be angry, for the most part it is just trying to do its own thing. And even then, like, you don't ever see, like, whenever you're watching a documentary and you see like an animal that like a hunter killing its prey, it's never done like in a malicious fashion. There are a couple of cases of animals being malicious, which is a conversation for a different day. About the psychology of some creatures and how they seem to have developed malicious tendencies. But for the most part, it's never done out of a screw you, chicken. It's more okay. If I don't eat you, I'm going to die.
Well, I was watching one of the Blue Planets the other day with my wife, and she was watching it. We were watching a mountain lion try and get a mountain goat, and obviously she was looking at it, and I was looking at it as well, I suppose, although I try and speak contraire because I think I'm funny. But she was watching it thinking like, oh, get out of there, mountain goat, the lion's going to eat you. Oh, I'm so happy the goat got away. And in the back of my head I'm thinking, but now the lion dies, and all of its little lion cubs die.
There's no winning if you're trying to be
you're cheering for lion cub death.
If you've got too much compassion, nature is not for you.
Like just because it's a fluffy bunny doesn't mean the fluffy bunny doesn't like. Have you seen like videos of hares fighting each other? They beat the crap out of each other.
Boxers,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I guess the whole point is that it's not that the whole point is that it's not it's not an emotional intent. It's more a necessity, and that's kind of what green's all about. Is that nature at the end of the day will rule out.
There isn't a good, there isn't a bad. It's very similar to black in that respect, which is again why Golgari works.
That's very. I think Golgari is a perfect way of taking the narcissistic side of black and all of the poor intention of evil characters. And if anything, Golgari is a perfect marriage of. Well, actually, no. A lot of Black's processes are natural processes.
It's justified.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And there is an absolute lack of morality when it comes to nature, because there is no one sitting there tipping the balance of the scales one way or another, deciding what's good and just. Essentially, it is the survival of the fittest.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that I think it's also because green is such a harmonious color. At no point is it ever really seeking to conflict with other colours or tell them they're wrong. It tends to work as we said, like all of the 5 different two color combinations.
Four two-colour combinations.
I'm counting on my hand and it's just not making sense. There isn't purple yet. That's not a colour yet. So out of all of them, even the Simic, where it is kind of working this dichotomy between natural selection and educated progression.
Yeah, sure.
Even then, it's still trying to do it in a harmonious fashion.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I guess the big toss-up then where that can kind of change is within the most recent Ravnica stories, where you have Zagana and her kind of section of Simic, and then you have Vanifar and her section of the Simic, and Vanifar is much more aggressive.
Sexy lady.
Sexy ooze lady. Yeah, she's got a cool hairdo. But Vanifar is all about trying to push to the limits, which is maybe going towards more the blue, whereas Zagana is more about, it's that kind of, we will, give nature a push, but we have to then work within the rules of nature with our understanding.
Yeah, I would say that some of the craces, some of them are a bit strange.
Some of the craces.
Shark's Crab.
Shark's Crab, which I think was a great spiritual successor to Shamble Shark.
On the 8th day, why God didn't decide that Shark's Crabs were necessary. And on the 8th day, he realised he had fucked up. And went back and recreated the Shark's Crab.
Rewind. No. Yeah. Shark's Crab is great.
This is why Atlantis fell, because it was just full of shamble sharks and sharks.
Shamble Shark. We decided a long time ago that Shamble Shark sounded like Shamble Shark.
It was a cloudfin raptor. I don't know why it was like an evil villain, but a proud, maniacal scientist.
Yeah. Well, if I was an evil scientist, I'd ride a cloudfin raptor.
I'd ride a shark to crab.
You'd have a shark's crab now, would you?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
God. Anyway, we digress.
I love the Civic. I think the Civic are great.
I think the Civic are very good. But obviously that's them, is that idea of that twist. The twist on green is quite, I'd say it seems quite forced for some other colour combinations because they can seem at odds in their ethos.
Yeah,
whereas green can kind of seem to flex. At the end of everything is a natural thing.
Yeah.
I say everything is a natural thing.
Everything is a natural thing to some point, yeah.
I mean, obviously every creature in Magic is a living creature, and all of the mana tapping, realistically, if you would make Magic a ubiquitous one colour, I think green is the natural one to go for, because otherwise how are you tapping into your mana in the first place anyway? Which
is actually interesting. When we went to Kaladesh, and obviously Kaladesh is all around artefacts and all that kind of thing, they had to make artefacts work in a lot of the context of the different colours, even ones that wouldn't necessarily go for artefacts. And the playmat that you've got your laptop on is actually Rishgar Pima Renegade, who's part of the elves of that plane, who they seem to make nature work, but again, it's all about, they still are artificers and they still make filigree and all this kind of thing, but they seem to be within the natural shapes of nature. Yeah. So even when it comes to artifact-related green cards, they still seem to have their basis in the natural way is best. You know?
Yeah, because even when you looked at Mirrodin, it was mostly Azuri's Brigade and Carapace Forger were kind of I'm just putting brown and green cards from the block out of my head. But I'm thinking so even Carapace Forger, it's enhancing himself. Azuri's Brigade, I think they're on a back of a load of boars. Yeah. With metal spines. I guess even on the sets where you have to kind of push to see as I say, like an artifact plane, green typically doesn't work particularly well with artifacts. It doesn't like artifice. Sure. It likes natural things. So it has a kind of usually a typical despondency to artifacts, and has a lot more back to nature and things like Nature's Reclaim and these kinds of cards are cards that destroy artifacts. Yeah. And the flavour and the mechanic is the idea of where it's like taking metal out into the woods. It's not considered to be a good thing. If you see a can or whatever, a Budweiser can in your local wooded area, if you live in the countryside. Sure. Then it seems so out of place and it seems so wrong, and obviously green doesn't like that.
But there is another side to it. I remember there's Tolarian Community College. The professor does a series where it's office hours, where he does little skits with planeswalkers or famous Magic characters, and kind of highlights the inconsistencies in their story. And there was an episode where it was Graham Stark from Loading Ready Run was playing Garrick, and they were in this little skit. And Garrick was talking about how society is bad and civilization is bad. And the professor points out that he's holding an axe. Yeah. That was forged.
From a forge.
From a forge.
Yeah, it's probably a blacksmith.
Do you know what I mean? So, there is there's two sides.
It's really hard. Right? Sometimes you have a cheat day and you might be vegan, but you can't help but have a vanilla
by
milkshake.
The forge.
Just every now and again you got to have a cheat day. I think obviously in the most extreme, green would obviously sit with druids, nomads, the people that would like Hermit Druid, for example, is a good example of which would completely separate themselves off of a structured society. But obviously, not everything can fall into extremes. Otherwise, it would all fall off the edge.
That's true. Cool. Right, let's move on then. So the next kind of big green tenet is the affinity to lands.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. I mean, obviously it has, as we've said before, there's lots of cards that either you enchant lands to make them tap for more mana, or not instants typically, but sorceries that will go and fetch more mana, and even creatures that tap for mana. Like one of the marquee cards of green is Llanowar Elves, which is a 1-drop that taps for green, and it's got iterations in Findhorn Elves and Elvish Mystic and those kinds of things. And having, I mean, I play an Elf Ball Marwyn deck.
Yeah.
And some of the some curves that you get are just insane.
Yeah,
when you're
crazy.
when you're playing Garruk Wildspeaker into Garruk Caller of the Wilds on turn 5, you know, you've maybe got a bit of power going on.
Yeah, sure. I guess it kind of like there's not much point harping on about this one because it's such a key aspect of green that it's just if you're in green, you're going to be okay for mana no matter what you do. Everything syncs up to make sure that you've got the power to keep going.
Yeah, because typically it tends to be permanent mana production as well, whereas black has some ritual effects and red has a lot of ritual effects. You very rarely see, outside of mana rocks, artifacts that tap for mana, you very rarely see like creatures that tap for other colours typically. I mean, you might have something like Rattleclaw Shaman where it taps for the 3 different colours of the Temur clan because it was a Temur card. But it's a green card specifically. And the only colour you really need to flip it, apart from if you do the morph and flip it to do colourless. But the only the colour it is predominantly is green, even if it does.
Very
tap for
rare
3
are there
colours.
like mana dorks that are outside of green or artifacts.
Yeah, like the one I can think of recently is the elemental cat from 2020 that taps for elemental spells. Or Chandra spells, but it's very specific.
Yeah,
in the mana that you can make for.
Like Flavour Flea, that's because it is an elemental itself. It's lending itself to those elementals.
Flamekin also had like the Soulfire Flamekin, which made Soulbright Flamekin, which made mana, but it required you to put mana into it and that works within the flavour of stoking a fire.
Yeah.
Whereas green's mana production, as I said, tends to be a little bit more permanent. Like look at Birds of Paradise, for example.
Yeah.
Like it's a green 1-drop that taps for any colour, and that's going right. So it's any colour, but it requires green for you to be able to do that.
Yeah. Noble Hierarch is another famous one.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. It taps for 3 different colours, but it requires green for you to play it. So I mean, typically, it does also set green up as being like the colour that, if you want to play competitively, getting to 3 mana or 4 mana return earlier is much better than, obviously much better than not, but it will put you in a much more powerful position, especially 1v1 in like constructed formats, where you can guarantee it a lot more. Like we saw a reprint of Llanowar Elves not too long ago. The same kind of era that they reprinted Lightning Bolt. And the problem with these kinds of 1-drops is that because they accelerate the game a lot, like the Llanowar Elves means that your 3-drops can't be too powerful because they'll be coming out on turn 2. And you have to kind of then balance that non-green 2-drops can at least keep up a little bit. In the same fashion that you can't really make creatures that have 3 or less toughness up at converting mana cost 4 or greater, because Lightning Bolt is a single mana answer to it. Like that extra step that green can take, if it's not kept in check, can be very, very difficult to keep up with.
Sure.
And obviously a lot of that comes from the fact that it does do permanent mana advancement and mana generation and mana ramp, which is, I think, probably one of the most powerful things you can do in Magic, beyond drawing cards.
Yeah.
Which green also happens to get quite a bit of.
Well, it does, yeah, it certainly does now, that's for sure.
I think it's technically third behind black and blue. Like blue's obviously the front runner by
I think
a
it's
stretch.
the synergies though. So if you look at recent cards where you have so you've got the Guardian Project, which is the enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, draw a card.
Yeah, well, a creature that doesn't share a name of, obviously an EDH, that doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, so it doesn't have to share a name.
That's
the drawback for smaller deck formats. Then you also have Beast Whisperer, which is the 4-drop elf from the latest Ravnica sets, which whenever you cast a creature, you draw a card.
Exactly. You got Setessan Enchantress that was from the latest set. Whenever a constellation, whenever an enchantment comes in, gets +1/+1.
And many of the creatures are constellations. Yeah. But I think the thing with green, the reason that, especially in Battlecruiser formats, you have this idea that green seems to have all these card draw engines, is because with all the other card draw engines in, say, black or blue or whatever, you have to either pump a bunch of mana into it just to get the card draw effect, like in blue, or with black, it has to be some kind of sacrifice of life or sacrifice of a creature or whatever else. Whereas with green, you just need to put the enchantment down, and then you're playing creatures anyway. Like, its synergy is just so inherent. Yeah. It just kind of actually seems like you're not doing anything. There's no reward for what you're doing. Like, in terms of, you don't have to make some kind of big gesture to draw these cards.
You're not having to flex your deck around it. It's
you're just playing
the way
your
deck
naturally
actually works. Yeah. I mean, I guess green. Some of the greens.
The Great Henge is another one, which is
the Great Henge is just a bonkers card anyway. So, I mean, that's just. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what colour it's in. Stupid card.
Sure.
Obviously, Great Henge plays into everything that green wants to do, having like high power creatures, mana production, gaining life. I mean, it just does everything. It's just such a ridiculous card. But I mean, that's a point that we'll come on to later.
Well,
about the power of green.
I mean, there we go. But then that kind of goes in quite nicely to. I mean, we spoke about it a little bit earlier, but it's despondency for artifice.
Yeah.
And like we started talking about Kaladesh and about how like actually they kind of synced things up. But actually, I mean, I don't know. It used to be this idea that green was at odds with artifice because it's the idea of machine versus nature. This is kind of a very big sort of fantasy trope that you find a lot of stuff. But I think recently that's kind of not true anymore.
Well, they try and flex again. They try and fit the cards to the flavour, like things like Wolf Saddle. Is a good example because typical equipment wouldn't be. I guess the idea is you want to move metal away from wood. I guess is kind of the way that it naturally feels for me is that obviously the forests and woods and all that nonsense are very green based and metal technically isn't like as much as it does naturally form in the earth. It's not naturally occurring within. But then who's to say that the evolution of man and the way that it learned how to make tools and things isn't? Would they say would a green mage then look at that and think, oh, actually, that's you're using your blue head there. You're thinking too much.
Why is
how dare you think so much?
We see all these shamans and all these druids wearing leather clothes and fur clothes. That's just as much a step to craft those clothing as it is to stoke a forge and to make a sword.
I guess the idea maybe the problem with the forge is that you have to create fire, and that's that.
Fire is a great destruction of nature.
But then obviously. A general campfire wouldn't think of as being destructive if you use if you use
they have to cook the
and
meat
things like you have to, exactly.
I mean, this is it. But then maybe this is why a lot of people and a lot of maybe the game designers and a lot of the people who make these cards, they can justify it in a lot of ways because green is just inherently in everything. Nature,
if you're trying to do survival, at what point does survival come at the odds of your natural? Your natural state of living and being. So I guess it's at that point it's tricky. That's a bit more of a. That's a bit more of a philosophical conversation.
I mean, you've written here on the outline when we're talking about artifacts that there's a despondency for artifice, and it focuses on enchantments over artifacts. This has actually always sat kind of odd with me in the flavour of green because there are a lot of green cards like Back to Nature and Naturalize and all that kind of thing that are specifically designed to destroy enchantments because again, enchantments are like if like a sword is like a forged piece of nature, an enchantment or some kind of hex is like a forged piece of magic that isn't necessarily the natural flow of what's going on.
No, it's kind like of a glamour or something like that.
It's kind of odd that enchantments as they are seen in say things like white and black are also quite a big green thing.
But then if you look at like auras like oaken form and things like that, that to me makes sense. It's like this idea of imbuing strength in a permanent form instead of just something like say giant growth, which for a green you add +3/+3 to a creature. That feels like giant growth is very evocative. And I think things like I think the enchantments that increase your power and toughness or give you like say canopy cover or something like that.
Sure.
I think that works. But I think the idea as well is that white was originally the colour that did like killing either enchantments or artifacts, like the non-creature thing. Green's actually moved into this more as well. It has a lot of effects that destroy target non-creature permanent. So everything from look at like a 6-line, for example, or say Terastodon. The fact that they will specifically like Terastodon just does destroy any non-creature, so that can even be planeswalkers, whereas acidic slime's limited to enchantments, lands, or artifacts.
Beast Within hit permanents?
Any permanent for Beast Within though, so you can also hit a creature. But that's like the breakiest, like the colour breakiest kind of card that I guess it's kind of
I guess it is odd to me because for the function of the game as a game, it wouldn't make sense to green just not have any enchantments. And I guess you can justify it. Again, we're justifying it very easily even after finding problems with it. If you enchant say a field so that it grows better, that feels very green. Or if you enchant so what's the enchantment from the most recent Ravnica, which is like the Seaborn Muse effect, but you only do it on your next opponent's turn.
Bollocks.
Wilderness Reclamation?
Yeah, we go. Exactly.
Yeah, Wilderness Reclamation. So you untap all your lands on your next opponent's upkeep.
No, it's your end step.
On your end step.
You don't get it. You don't get it every single time.
That seems. That does seem justifiable, but I don't know. Just in my head, this is where when we were talking about white. And white seemed to have a lot of pitfalls of what it couldn't do because it had these kinds of restrictions. And you kind of went, well, it's okay that it has restrictions, but maybe to give it a bit more legs, you want it to move into auras. With green, you can kind of green just seems to be so inherently there with every kind of card type and every kind of card trope in Magic.
Well, it was the Enchantress colour to begin with.
But then I think if you were to maybe... We did this for white. We haven't really done this with the other colours, but if you were to do this with green, I'd say it makes more sense to have maybe auras be in green, because it is like you're giving like oak form, or like
or fertile ground, like enchanting a land to make it more fertile.
Enchanting individual permanents, because it's like you're imbuing them with the power of nature, as opposed to just going, here's a world effect. It's just like, oh, okay. Like,
I guess like something like privileged position does feel. I mean, obviously it feels very Selesnya anyway, but it gets to that point of like, where's the natural progression?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I mean, I play a Karametra EDH deck, so that's the white and green aspect. And for me, all of those hexproof things, like Privileged Position, or like Shalai, Voice of Plenty, which gives all of your creatures hexproof and gives you hexproof, that feels like the white portion of those cards. It doesn't feel like the green one. But then you look at something like, there are green enchantments that give you hexproof or give your other opponents hexproof.
Yeah.
And
well, you've also got things like Sigarda that stops you from sacrifice. I mean, obviously, when green and white get together, they can do a lot of tax and limitation effects, because it feels a little bit like not only the natural order, but no, it's not just, I'm going to let nature do what it should do. It's like, no, nature is going to do what it's going to do, and I'm going to stop you from doing the thing to stop it. Yeah. And that's obviously where the white side comes into this idea of forced order.
Yeah.
I guess each colour's going to have its own ways to deal with, to interact with certain things. Like, obviously, black doesn't necessarily get enchantment removal. Like, certain colours will have like white gets more deliberate affinity to planeswalkers and that kind of thing. So there should always be a way for each colour to have each permanent type kind of work with it.
I mean, this is the card I was thinking of, aestheticism. I can't say.
Aestheticism.
3/2 green enchantment. Creatures you control can't be the targets of spells or abilities your opponents control. So it gives them hexproof, and it's also got a regenerate cost on there as well. That doesn't seem very green. I like it when creatures say can't be countered.
Yeah.
Because that makes it seem like the creatures are so powerful and imbued with nature that they push through. But to give a world effect that just went, oh no, everything's got protection, that's a white thing, surely?
I don't know. I think the whole point is it's supposed to be that you're not interfering with nature, and you're letting it, and you're ensuring that nature can do what it do. And asceticism does that in twofold, with the fact it has the regenerate ability as well, of going, okay, right, protect my, like, I guess it's that similar effect to having Hunter's Instincts, the one that gives it +1/+1 and hexproof.
Yeah, I think so.
I guess the idea is it's almost like the trick that's being played against you from the Fire Mage or whatever doesn't affect your natural armor, as it were. And I like hexproof more than Shroud, because Shroud, if it was Shroud, I think I'd feel like it was more of a white or blue effect. But the fact that it's hexproof and you're stopping your opponents from interfering with the way that your things are living and growing, I think that's kind of the point. I think the idea is, don't interfere with my thing. Let nature do what nature wants to do. And I think that hexproof is not only something that is solidarily green now anyway. I think it kind of works to that effect. But I know what you mean. Like when I look at certain cards and you're like, okay, you're uncounterable. You've got hexproof. You've got like Carnage Tyrant, for example, which is bonkers. Yeah. But that's another example of where they kind of they had to push creatures to a certain point, because I mean everything dies to Doomblade.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like there was always that argument that removal kind of beats most cards. It's like, well, if my creature's really efficient, or it takes a lot for you to get that, actually my creature killed your removal.
But then is that not a bigger problem? Like with Magic, I remember when I first started playing Magic, when you were kind of showing me the ropes of the game, you were slightly nostalgic for a time, which I don't think it was even gone by the time you started playing, but you were nostalgic for a time where creatures weren't necessarily the main course of a win. Yeah. And creatures were almost there to kind of just be like sort of, removal soak-ups, or like, to kind of make people use their resources.
Yeah, or you'd use like, say, like Control decks would use like a single Aetherling or something like that, and that had the multi-purpose built-in protection that meant you could just rely on your one little win condition to hit in. But yeah, I mean, there was obviously a massive slew of years of spell slinging being much more powerful, because creatures were just so behind curve. Yeah. Like you look at, Kamigawa's got a heap ton of bad press and obvious issues, but one of them is if you look at the converted mana cost to power toughness ratio, is incredibly low, and it just makes for weak. You don't want your 5 mana spell feeling like it has to attack 15 turns to be able to win the game, and that does not seem efficient.
That's a real feel bad, right?
Whereas if you turn around, you'd make a 7 mana 8/8 trample, can't be countered. It kicks your opponent up the arse when it comes into play and it gives you a sloppy kiss when you win. Those kinds of, typical green cards. I assume that some of those abilities are on Questing Beast since it has all of them.
I mean, yeah, I think I read somewhere that Questing Beast also makes you breakfast in the morning as well.
It does, it buys you a drink in the morning. Yeah. It even calls back. Calls back.
One of the other heads is calling you a taxi. Yeah, exactly. For the itself. Cool. All right, well, let's move on then. So, I mean, we've spoken a lot about the shamans and the druids and the kind of nomadic lifestyle that kind of green produces. So, I think that kind of is kind of self-evident. But what are the established roles and mechanical rules that green has kind of actually functioning in the game? Like, we've spoken a lot about the mechanics of other colours. Like, what does green actually do?
Well, I guess it is, if we're looking back from our first episode talking about, like, player demographics, it is the Timmy colour. It is the colour of play the biggest, dumbest creature, and for the most part, really hope that it sticks.
Yeah.
It still has, throughout your biggest creatures, Gigantosaurus and County Hydra and things like that. Like, some of the mana costs on green spells are ridiculous. Like, anything up to like 8 green pips in the mana cost, and they're usually absurdly big as well. Being like 10/10s, 11/11s.
Or at least they make some kind of big splash on the battlefield. If you look like Hornet Queen.
Yeah.
Which is what? Is it 4 green, green?
Yeah, you get 4 green. You get a 2/2 flying death touch and 4 1/1 flying death touch tokens.
Which might as well just be one giant creature that smacks you in the air.
Yeah, right? So it's either I guess a 6/6 flying death touch, or you've got so many blockers.
Yeah, exactly.
So many blockers. It's
so
such a galling
impactful
card.
creatures.
Yeah, of course. It needs to, especially these days. Obviously, they've caught up a little bit, but the whole point is if you're making all this mana, you need. Typically, if you're making mana, you're wasting cards. Essentially, you're wasting card advantage because you're only putting lands into play or developing your mana. You're not actually affecting the board, so you need to then back that up by maybe overcompensating a little bit with
overcompensating on the back end. You don't do anything classically you're not meant to be doing anything for turns 1, 2, 3, and then turns 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Whilst your opponents are putting out like 2 3s or like 2 4s, you're slapping down 8 8s.
Yeah, their mana curve might peter off a little bit, and on turn 6 they're playing 2 3 3s, whereas on turn 6 you're going, actually I'm playing this 8 8. I'm playing 8
and Crater Hoof.
And I've got something exactly the oops Crater Hoof kind of thing.
Oops Crater Hoof.
Yeah, or oops Avenger of Zendikar. I mean, some of the green's big creatures are just absurd. They just do such. I mean, obviously they kind of have to. It's this classic case as well of like most creatures have a cheaper foil in removal in the same way that any big board has a cheaper foil in a wrath effect.
It's interesting though when we talk about Crater Hoof and Avenger of Zendikar, these big, for Commander at least, these big game ending green creatures, because actually I don't know if I've earned my EDH player card yet officially, because I don't think I've been in a game where someone's put a Crater Hoof down and won the game with it.
That's actually a really good point. I don't think.
I can't remember the last time that's happened. I can't remember the last time either that either me or an opponent has played an Avenger of Zendikar and had it last more than 2 turns. I've certainly never been hit with a bunch of plants, and I think I'll tell you why. It's the same reason that people don't play land destruction in white, because it's just so done that people go Crater Hoof and everyone else goes, oh, great, well done you.
I guess clap. Yeah, exactly. Tooth and nail, game over.
Yeah.
It's not quite.
I don't think people want to do it anymore.
No, they don't want to do it necessarily anymore. Plus, it's not as. I mean, don't get me wrong, Crater Hoof Behemoth isn't a bad card, but it's not quite as. It's not as. I guess I'm going to say it's not as good as it used to be. It very much is. Maybe it's just.
I'd rather play a Finale of Devastation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get more creative with it.
Yeah, I
Create
guess,
your own Crater Hoof.
Getting Ulamog instead, that's much fairer magic.
Oh, all right. Okay. I'll stop playing Karametra as much.
So going forward, it also left one from the red episode. Doesn't use direct damage whatsoever.
No.
So its evergreens, like, it tends to have a lot of obviously it's gonna have lots of creature abilities, but its creature abilities tend to be the most potent ones.
Yeah.
Take away Double Strike, and I think arguably, Double Strike is probably arguably the most, quote unquote, again air quotes every episode, most powerful. But if you look at the potency across this, if you think about like the versatility of the creature abilities, like they're actually pretty damn good. So you've got Trample, which already nullifies chump blocking, which obviously if you've got big creatures, you need the Trample to help, trample over.
Yeah.
You don't want to be blocked by 1/1 tokens all day. It has Reach to be able to block flying creatures. It might not necessarily. I mean, it's not the biggest creature, biggest colour for having flying creatures. As much as people joke about the 3 black green 4/4 flying vigilance.
Sure.
From the Great Design Search debacle. As much as it does have some flyers like Hornet Queen, and it tends to work predominantly want things like archers and spiders, which will have
reach. Yeah. Which is nice. That's really flavorful.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, the spiders having reach is just like, obviously it just works perfectly.
I mean, spiders are such a green creature type, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, from the beginning, the first set of Magic, it's been the giant spider who's been
It's
around.
interesting that, actually, I've never really thought about archers as a creature type. You're right, they are almost exclusively green. I can't think of any white ones.
Yeah, there's
Mono
hero, Brigid. Hero of Kinsmen.
Oh, okay. But is that a legendary creature?
Yeah. And she's, as far as I'm aware, I think she's got a bow and arrow.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Like, again, that's a very civilization thing. You have to make the bow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but what are you making a bow from? Is it horse's hair? Which usually it's supposed to be horse's hair. Wait, that's violin.
I don't know.
Sticks?
The violin sticks, violin bow.
Yeah, but yeah, it's still a bow. Yeah, we go. Good.
Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, where we talk about all things violins.
So beyond reach in terms of like blockability, because obviously you want your creatures to be able to have a bit of back and forth. They've also got vigilance as a secondary evergreen a keyword for green, which obviously helps it be attacking and blocking. Something like end race forerunners, for example. Forget it gives everything vigilance. So not only are you not attacking out, you've still got blockers for the back. I mean, that's not necessarily as good as a creative, but it doesn't do a bad job.
I mean, sure, but then that's a pretty high metric, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you can't judge everything by a creative behemoth. It also has death touch, so like things like Sedge Scorpion and Oran Viper, like snakes and spiders and things that are venomous.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really the only other colour that has death touch outside of black. But obviously, if black's paired with something, it can give it death touch. But green kind of does it all on its own. Yeah. Which is kind of interesting. You'd think that it would just be a black ability.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that Freak is the snake in Theros Beyond Death. Like, I think it's Freak is chosen, I'm not sure. I can't remember. But it's the 1/1 snake. I mean, they have this across like almost limited formats. If they have big dumb creatures that have auras and stuff, you every now and again want to throw in the 1/1 death touch.
Yeah,
because,
sure.
It kind of helps stall the board a little bit. But obviously that's supposed to be like it's the natural venom of a creature. So I mean, it still does.
Yeah, no, I think it's good.
Green, hexproof as we've discussed before, being able to give your have your creatures inherently or bestowed with the ability to not be targeted by your opponent's stuff. No shenanigans, basically. Leave my big green thing alone. And then it also has regenerate, not as much anymore. Troll. It was what was known as. Originally it's funny because Hexproof used to be known as Troll Shroud because it was on cards like Troll Ascetic.
Oh, okay.
And Thrun the Last Troll.
Thrun the Last Troll, yeah.
Having that ability built in, and obviously they keyworded it to Hexproof. But it used to be called Troll Shroud specifically because of the cards that were trolls.
So that kind of undermines my argument that I don't think Hexproof across all creatures is a very green thing because it did come from green. I guess but then maybe for me as a much more modern player. I mean, I've been playing for 6-7 years now, but I'm still relatively modern. I guess it just doesn't seem to translate.
Well, there's a lot of these wasn't initially keyworded, but green did it for a long time. Abilities, but we'll look at that in a little bit. It also has, I'll say, like regenerate was also in green. The ability to either pay mana, typically to pay mana to prevent the creature being destroyed. Almost that ability. Regenerate feels like a green ability. I mean, it feels like a black-green ability, if I'm being completely honest.
Sure.
But this idea of regeneration, this idea of
I think
I mean, I guess white.
I think it's better in green because with black, the idea is that it does go to the graveyard and it's like you're taking out a corpse. Yeah. Whereas with generation, it's more like
it's healing.
It's healing. Like the power of nature has kind of reinvigorated this freshly deceased thing. It's not been mulched over. Do you know what I mean? Like it's regenerated, or like how how like things like lizards and
exactly grow limbs back
and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
So that's all kind of like the main proper evergreen creature abilities that it has. Obviously it has quite a lot of them, and these are all very good abilities, and they kind of round out green's abilities. So, I mean, it has even something called I guess it's called super trample. Again, air quoting, where it can only be blocked by one creature, or it can assign combat damage as if it wasn't blocked.
Sure, kind of like reverse menace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That kind of thing. I think it's Charging Rhino that does that. It's a 4/4 trample that has to be blocked by only one creature.
Yeah, sure.
And then you have, as I say, there are some creatures that will just deal damage, like Siege Behemoth from one of the older commander sets, of where it can allow you to deal damage as if to the defending players if the creatures weren't blocked.
Yeah.
So even if you do block, doesn't matter. You're getting hit in the face. I mean, the whole point of green is that it's not trying to be fancy with I'm going to win by having 100 life, or I'm going to win by decking you, or anything, or doing you direct damage. Like, no, I'm going to hit you in the face a lot.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
It doesn't really pussyfoot around. It's
well, that's one of the things. One of the things you put in these established roles and mechanics is the fight effect, the fight mechanic.
Yeah,
that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, I think that's really flavourful. I think that's very nice.
The idea that your creature is outside of combat, but you're forcing like this one-on-one fight to the death.
Yeah.
So it's your target creature you control fights target creature another player controls, and they do still do damage to each other. That's correct. That is correct.
Yeah. With the fight mechanic. Yeah.
Is it life gain and death touch still count in the fight
absolutely.
mechanics
So
as well?
if you do fight with a death touch creature, it'll kill whatever it's hitting. If you do fight with a lifelink creature, you'll still gain life.
Yeah, and that's a really nice way of doing things. They brought in a lot of those effects, especially flavorful with like creatures like werewolves, things that have some kind of hierarchy complex.
That had rabid bite in it, which doesn't fight back. It's just
it's just straight in there,
bite,
which is great.
Bite your face. Well, you have obviously Savage Punch,
and
is it Grizzly? I can't remember the one that's from Unstable, but it's either way, bears getting punched in the face.
Yeah,
is great. I mean,
what was the card art which had the suplex on it recently?
Yeah, that was the bollocks. I'm sure that was that the Unstable.
If anyone if anyone on Twitter can tell us which of the card arts had someone giving a bear a suplex.
Yeah, I'm sure it was one from Unstable. I feel like it
would
be
I
outside.
think wasn't it in Eldraine?
Might be Eldraine.
Well, there we go. Right.
Anyway, there's a long history of hilarious cards of animals being abused somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously this fight mechanics idea of that natural Fight Club would be a green arena. I feel like.
Sure.
Obviously, of course, we don't talk about it. So
yeah.
Growth, obviously being a savage role, you talked about this creature enhancement and improvement, whether it's through permanent +1/+1, either through counters, which has been a big thing recently. Natural selection is a +1/+1 counter, and it fights a creature for 3 and a green. Natural selection, obviously working directly with this theme of going with your natural progression.
Yeah.
But obviously having things like enchantments as well, in order that sit on your creature and improve their power toughness, maybe give them a keyword or whatever.
Sure. But you also get things like so I like this idea of growth of you either giant growthing or putting like a trollhide armor or something on your creature, which improves the physical creature. But I think you can also have growth going into areas like evolutionary leap and birthing pod.
Oh yeah.
This idea that you're taking one creature, folding it into your power source to produce something that's bigger. I think that's kind of a nice idea
I like that
as well.
It's almost like forced evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite nice.
Yeah, which is really cool. And I think effectively it's the same thing because you're getting a bigger creature on the board than you had done before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Birthing pod's great.
I like Birthing pod
those effects I think are really flavourful, and it could only have been a green card. You could argue it's a black one, but even Vanifar, which does a similar thing, is a blue-green card.
Yeah, and then you have like obviously Neoform and the new weird enchantment birthing pod thing from Theros Beyond Death, of where you sacrifice an enchantment, you can get a creature that costs +1 more.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So obviously this effect is a little bit gimmicky because obviously that's this idea of forced evolution, but evolution still has to be natural.
It seems a bit more primal though. If you're literally killing something for the good of the rest of like your pack, I think that seems a bit more animalistic than blue-like.
Yeah,
we've already spoken a lot about the card advantage, like draw based on creatures. Things like Solar Harvest, the Guardian Project, Beast Whisperer, rewarding you for playing creatures. That's kind of that's the draw engine.
You've also got things like Rishkar's Expertise.
Oh, Rishkar's Expertise, sure.
Yeah, draw cards equal to the greatest power on creatures you control and that kind of thing. Like, this idea you're relying on there being a creature in play or creatures being played to generate your card advantage rather than just having a straight up draw spell.
Yeah, sure.
Like, usually you can't... I mean, apart from Harmonize, which was a colour shifted card from Concentrate anyway.
So two colourless, 2 green for draw 3 cards.
Yeah, which is you could
silly.
Some people could argue it's behind her, but I really don't think it is.
I don't play it in any of my decks because I just kind of think that any green deck that's playing Harmonize, at least for me, that's a slot which now could have something like a Guardian Project in it. So why wouldn't I have the permanent card draw there?
Yeah, I guess
I'm going to be drawing way more than 3 cards off of things like that.
Yeah, and I guess the argument is in a vacuum, it's pure card advantage. It doesn't rely on any other card to help it work.
It doesn't feel very green to me. I don't play it.
That's what I mean. That's why it does have. I mean, green does get card draw, but it doesn't get card draw like that very often.
Sure. Or things like what's the Pokedex? Lifecrafter's Bestiary. Yeah, which is a 3-dropper artifact where whenever you cast a creature, you may pay a green and you may draw a card.
Yeah,
which I think is a really nice idea. Because flavorfully, just in a bubble, that card, it's like you're scanning, because it's the Kaladeshi version of a Pokedex.
It is, yeah.
Where they're the life crafters, who are the people that make artificial animals, are getting inspiration from life animals. So the card art shows someone scanning the visage of a creature. So you're getting the knowledge of that creature, and if you pump a little bit of green mana into it, it's like you're gaining that creature's essence.
Yeah.
I really like that. That's kind of cool.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, I think Green's card draw feels very nice. It does tend to feel quite like succinct, and it works quite nicely. Which is nice. I mean, you don't need. I mean, the fact that it relies on its creatures is directly pushing you to push for what Green wants to be doing anyway. Having big dumb nonsense, which thankfully, if they stick around, you get rewarded for.
Sure. And the last thing you've put here for Green with this kind of bigger tenants is tokens! Exclamation point.
2 exclamation
points. Do apologise.
Yeah, kind of. I got to the end of of all the different things it does, and kind of completely forgot that. Yeah, as much as white's supposed to. I say white's supposed to be, as if there is anyone ever out there that said this is what this colour does and no other colour gets to do it. But Green does a lot of tokens.
Yeah, sure.
Everything from saplings to, as I said before, beasts. You've got elf tokens, whether they're elf warrior tokens or
Balos.
Balos. You get lots of things. It loves making.
I mean, it's just endless, right?
The amount of the amount of different artworks I have for a 2/2 wolf token is literally nuts.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, as much as I'm not going to complain about having too many different artworks, but stop making new wolf artworks. I don't need any more.
Yeah, they're really good as well. They're already nice.
Yeah, but yeah, it does tend to, obviously, I mean, as much as it likes to play creatures for its mana, being able to make multiple creatures, whether it's something like Rampaging Ballast, whenever you play a land, you get a creature. Obviously, creatures.
Yeah.
Green and creatures should not...
Just making lots of creatures, which you can then suddenly pump up and
with,
smash
Overrun or Overwhelming Stampede. Obviously, these are... growth effects for your entire board, being either the typical 2 green for. Is
it Hunger of the Pack, which is the sorcery where you can destroy a creature, sacrifice target creature, you create that many walls equal to its power? That was actually Feed the Pack. So it's a 5 colourless and a green enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a non-token creature. If you do, put X 2/2 green wolf creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the sacrificed creature's toughness.
Boom.
That is one of the most green enchantments I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Talking about that kind of, growth element, the tokens, the flavour of it. I mean, the artwork's great as well by Steve Prescott. Yeah, really, really nice. I mean, that's Commander card all over, right?
That is very good. Yeah, I mean, if you have to play it in like a graveyard-based deck, Golgari deck or something like that, then yeah, it's very nice. Gets you lots of little wolfies for all your different wolf artworks.
Well, talking about wolves, because... Let's just move on to creatures then.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, there are. I mean, Green's creature types are pretty well established. It's very obviously Green's going to be the color of most animals anyway. Most like beasts. I would say beasts in like again air quoting beasts, not just the actual literal beast, but animals like wild animals, that kind of thing. I mean, its typical creature type is elves. For black zombies and reds goblins and whites humans. Green gets elves. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's being its humanoid race. There are centaurs as well, dryads, saprolings, as much as they're not quite as big as they were. Dominaria was the last
cool. This
big
kind of
showing
living
sapling.
fungus idea.
Yeah.
And
the fact that they've done again, like, I don't mind if you do 3 different artworks for saplings. They're all cute little fungi, cute little things.
Well, all the saplings from Dominaria.
Yeah, really pretty. And this little Slimefoot one flooding about. Oh, damn, I mean, that's so cute. Anyway, so yeah, we talked about wolves, but there's also like spiders, squirrels, like snakes. There's even like mongooses. There's like boars. There's so
definitely has one of the most varied token pools. For all like creatures.
Obviously, it's bigger. So if you're moving on to its more other typical ones, tree folk. As much as Lorwyn had black tree folk, for the most part, tree folk are.
I'd like to see tree folk return. They haven't been in the set for quite a while.
Well, we're not going to go back to Lorwyn ever.
Well, no, but it doesn't have to be Lorwyn. There are some. I mean, I'm surprised you didn't get much in Eldraine. We didn't get many.
Well, Innistrad had a couple, didn't we? Had a Tree of Perdition and things like that. Yeah,
was that a tree folk?
Yeah, I think it's a zombie. Oh, no, maybe plant. I think
it was a plant. I don't think it was actually a living tree.
Yeah, that's true. Faithful found.
Still a creature for some reason. Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Thalids were like the precursor to not precursor, but I mean Thalids were around a little bit before saplings as being like the fungus kind of token base. Again, another token.
Well, in the lore of Dominaria, Thalids make saplings and then eat them.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's nice.
Yeah.
That's like a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
Elementals, as much as they're in most colours, like green gets a lot of elementals. Obviously, its elementals tend to be more based in like plants. And things like look at Avengers of Zendikar, for example. It's even got a Hedron that's it's taken into
its body.
Into its body. Yeah, exactly. Look at something like Bane of Progress or something like that as well. If you want to look at weird, crazy, twisted abominations.
Yeah, the artwork for Bane of Progress and the artwork for Mykolov are incredibly similar, by the way.
Yeah,
obviously, we're an audio podcast, you can't see what I'm talking about, but look up those two artworks and you'll see what I mean. They're kind of scarily similar.
Yeah, it took a while for me to work out exactly where Bane of Progress's face was, but I kind of liked that anyway.
Well, that's the idea. It's not really conforming to any one form when it comes to elementals, is it? It's just, there's a great line which Kyle Hill from Because Science always uses, and it's that nature doesn't do what's aesthetically best, or nature doesn't do what works best. Nature just does what works. So if an elemental's face, if it doesn't really need a face, it's just doing it.
It's not going to have a face.
It's not going to have a face.
Yeah.
Like I always
some bird beaks are ridiculous. But
Woodfall Primus, the most recent.
Oh yeah,
I have no idea what's going on in that
tree beardy kind of thing going on.
I couldn't tell you what it is or where it is, but it kind of works.
Yeah, that's the thing. Obviously, the point about nature is you very rarely get pretty perfect trees.
Yeah, the most beautiful flowers are usually the ones that kill you.
Yeah, that's it, exactly, yeah. And even then you look like an orchid, it's so contrived in its design that clearly it was specifically for a reason to look like that. Whether it's to, because some of them look like hummingbirds and things like that when you, I guess like other, it's supposed to fall animals, aren't they? Nature's real tricksy. Nature's horrible. Nature's just trying to kill each other. So of course it's going to do like, oh, look how pretty I am. Well, actually, I guess the whole point is, oh, look how pretty and lovely my colour is.
Yeah,
come and take my pollen.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of plants do it as a warning.
Well, that too. But come take my pollen, bitch. Go and rub yourself up on my sister. Yeah. Good. I just realised how I said that. That.
I wouldn't try and ascribe families to plants. You're only going to get yourself into trouble.
I know. Well, they're asexual anyway, don't they? Self-produce, so it's fine.
Cool. So we have different oozes, yeah.
Worms, like not WORMS as much as there are actual WRMS worms in magic as well, but WURM worms. Yeah, like the in the same way that wyverns, even though we don't really get wyverns in magic, which is weird. I think,
no,
but like the less creatures. Yeah, the idea is lesser dragons. Like they don't have all the wings and the legs and everything. They are just like big. I mean, you look at Imperious Slagworm or what's the indestructible, the Convoke Constructible one that was the box topper from 1616 indestructible, isn't it? Or something stupid.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's Imperious Great Worm or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Anyway, point being that like it's big creatures and it has the idea was that that each colour has its own distinct like humanoid tribe base race being elves, and then this one for the big one is hydras as they move more towards it in green. Obviously it might have started in alpha in red, but over the course of time
I think we could do a whole episode on hydras. Hydras are so really interesting.
I didn't like the idea of them before. I thought it was really done. I thought there was only so much you could do. It's like, okay, colonial hydra, double up the possible counters.
No, hydras are great.
Protean hydra, okay, so you add the extra, but they've done a lot of stuff with them,
and they've done a really neat trick. The people who design magic sets have used hydras in really neat ways, not only just like their abilities, but actually portraying what a hydra is actually really is one of Magic's greatest achievements when it comes to their creature types. That, along with how they treat zombies on a lot of different planes, I think is really, really slick way of doing it.
Yeah, the artistic diversity they have between tribes, even within tribes, is quite interesting.
Yeah,
and then obviously at the end I had to put down snakes and slash naga.
Snakes/nagas. Yeah. Well, I mean,
I had to put that in at the end, obviously. And that's depending on whether you're thinking about the normal snakes, the Orochi snakes that have 4 arms, or the naga that have no legs but 2 arms.
Are you talking about the Orochi snakes from Kamigawa that are humanoid snakes
with 4 arms? Not normal snakes that have no limbs whatsoever. No. You get extra arms.
They get extra arms. Or the humanoid snakes from every other plane which they gave a humanoid creature type to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there was nothing cooler than seeing. There's one of the Sarashima.
Yeah.
Is the legend from Kamigawa, and his artwork is so cool.
Is he the one where he's the archer?
He's kind of doing one bow up, one bow down. Yeah, it's so cool.
He's kind of falling through
like
the
design. I like the design that the Kamigawa took with taking certain like things like rats and snakes and foxes and making them humanoid. I thought that was really good. I think it worked out very nicely.
Ninja Turtles, the set.
Oh man, they didn't even have Ninja Turtles. That's it. Kamigawa 2, Ninja Turtle Boogaloo.
They don't have Ninja Turtles.
Ninja Turtle Boogaloo. That's the only reason we need to go back to Kamigawa. It's fine. In terms of classes, there aren't very many, really, for green. Obviously, druids, shamans to a lesser extent, archers, of course, and then scouts. Because this idea of exploration, this idea of exploring the land.
I like that. That's nice.
Yeah. So
it's like a ranger, right? It's like Magic's version of a ranger.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of it for like the main typical creatures. I mean, it does have a very wide berth of creatures because obviously it encapsulates all the different animals from your natural wooded environment, which has a great diversity. Obviously, if you did like a different fish subtype for every type of fish, then obviously blue would have a lot of different creature types.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of green. It's funny that green tends to get its creature types separated out a little bit. So you have hounds as well as having. I mean, we commented on this last episode, but the fact it has hounds as well as wolves, and that kind of thing. Like, I mean, it tends to diversify a little bit more.
Yeah,
which is fine. You know, it's okay to have druids and nymphs and nymph dryads. It's fine. God damn, honestly, why is it always creature types? Like, we really don't like creature types in this chapter.
No, that's not true. I don't think it's that we don't like creature types. I just think there are certain times where maybe the balance between the gameplay, the slickness of gameplay, and the ability to kind of create tribal synergies or to kind of marry themes up across different planes outweighs the need to give everything its own thing.
Yeah, so do you give it its own specific creature type because it is a new creature type, or do you make it fall into and have natural synergies with the cards that already exist in the game?
But then on the flip side, so in the last Theros episode, I spoke about how the legendaries that we didn't get like a centaur legendary or a minotaur legendary, but actually we did get things like a harpy legendary, and we did get legendaries through the gods and demigods. So we did get interesting new creature types.
Sometimes you're not always going to get everything that you want.
I just felt, and I do feel with green sometimes as well, when you give something as kind of broad a term as beast, that seems like a bit of a no-win.
Yeah, you've already lost out.
When then if you then go, well, we'll be really specific and we'll call snakes nagas, and it's like, yeah, but now what you're doing is you're splitting up two things that are seemingly the same. Yeah. I just think sometimes creature typings can just be maybe just re-looked at.
Why are cats? Why a leonin and cats under cats, whereas naga and snakes aren't both under snakes.
I mean, this is its own.
Anyway, we always do this. We always get caught up on this. So then, looking at the latest core set, like this is funny because typically what we try to do with these is have a look at the latest core set being Magic 2020 to see kind of the state of green as it is now, where it was presented in its least bells and whistles kind of aspect, because the core sets are the beginning set. This is how they present the game to newer players and how newer players are supposed to understand the colours. Both that and then alpha, which we'll look at, because if you look at how things are now, it's nice to have a look and have a compare about how things were. Both sets actually, green's pretty. I don't want to say beige because that's it's quite rude, but it's not super complicated.
No, it does what it does.
But green isn't a complicated colour. We haven't actually said this at all at any point. We have touched on the Timmy side of things, but realistically, as much as a Spike can play green, because Lana Elves on turn 1 is a pretty impressive play and it's probably going to lead to a lot of wins, it is a Timmy colour because it doesn't necessarily require so much.
It's not a flashy play.
It's not doing anything. It doesn't have any caveats or any, not really any real tricks. Like most tricks it's going to have is a combat trick in response to your removal spell.
But they're usually
or
quite telegraphed.
Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't pussyfoot around. So at no point does it ever feel like like flavor-wise, mechanic doesn't ever feel like malicious. But again, the whole point is that nature shouldn't. But looking at the latest one, like its power toughness rate compared to say other colours and say compared to the initial sets of Magic, like it's really, really good. Like lots of 4 mana 4/4s with upsides, whereas back in the day you were paying 4 mana for 3/3s and being not happy about it, but it's as good as it got, bitch, deal with it. Whereas these days you get everything. Yeah, absolutely everything. I mean, the only reason why Questing Beast isn't more powerful is because it's a legendary creature.
Yeah, sure.
But it has even in the later set it has overcome. So what I kind of found interesting is that you look at a lot of the cards that are in the latest core set being like the mana producer, and the mana producer is actually 2 mana. It's one and a green, taps for a green, or if you have 3 or more elements, it taps for 2 green. But obviously the idea being that instead of a 1 mana makes 1 mana, it's now a 2 mana makes 1 mana. It doesn't have overrun in the set, 2 green for +3/+3 and trample to all your creatures. And it has overcome, which is 3 green for +2/+2 and trample.
Still the same effect, but
it's obviously a little bit smaller, and obviously it's a little less green. That's the idea. You add that extra green pip in for that extra point of power and toughness, and that kind of indicates exactly how like green mana works. Of being like if you make one of those green into a generic instead, and it gets that little bit touch less green, then it gets that little bit less on the power and toughness scale. There's lots of more enchantments in the latest core set talking about like this like natural growth, and obviously presenting to new players going, I played this creature, it's pretty efficient, let me next turn slap on this thing to make it even more efficient and go to town. And I've just listed the last thing as being it's very uncomplicated, like it is. Like even Siege Behemoth is just a big dumb 6 mana 8/8. 6 mana, 8/8 trample, and gives all your other creatures trample. There's lots of trample in the core set, in the latest core set. To be fair, so it's not particularly complicated. It doesn't do anything particularly.
Is that the same with Alpha? When we look back at Alpha,
Alpha's a bit more different. Alpha has, for the most, I mean, of all of the colours, Alpha has the least number of green has the least number of cards that are just like, wait, what?
Yeah, sure.
It has Camouflage, which is a very strange card, which deals with redistributing blockers and everything. You may rearrange your attacking creatures and place them face down, revealing which is which only after defense is chosen. If this results in impossible blocks, such as creatures with flying, creatures without flying blocking creatures with flying, those illegal blocks cannot be made. But the idea is that you basically go, okay, so I'm going to attack with everything, turn everything face down, shuffle. Now what are you going to block? Now, why the? I mean, I love Richard Garfield to bits, but some of the cards that he does, I'm like, what?
What were you thinking?
Why?
They weren't, were they? They were just trying everything.
I like the idea of camouflage. The worst thing is, if you look at the artwork on camouflage, it's really bad camouflage. It just looks like a kind of ghosty guy. If that's his, I don't know. I don't know how sometimes mechanically these cards are supposed to be. I mean, it's almost like in Alpha they had to take literal almost like literal definitions of the word,
sure,
of how to make that. Like Raging River is the red card that splits your blockers into two because there's a river that comes down between them. It's like at what point did you think you needed to encapsulate a raging river down the middle of the battlefield into a card? But beyond that, most of the artworks are a bit more synonymous and look more grounded rather than conceptual. There's only a couple of them that are a little bit weird, like Channel is a little bit weird. But most of the other artworks are actually pretty normal. There are some really pretty artworks in the Alpha. I mean, as much as some of the cards in some of the, like, don't get me wrong, Ironwood Tree Folk isn't the most aesthetically pleasing tree folk out of all of them. But you look at Regrowth, Regrowth's really, really pretty. And then you look at the Verundan Enchantress, for example, or Tranquility. Like, the artworks are so nice.
Yeah,
there's a lot of like Mark Paul works and things.
Is that
like
Verundan Enchantress? Is that the same artwork that was in 7th edition as well?
I don't think. No, it would have been updated.
No, the artworks. I mean, Green has some of the best artwork in the game.
I really like Green. I think the whole point is that it's. I think people like drawing nature a lot anyway.
Sure.
And it's a lot easier to draw nature without it having like artistic direction. Like, as much as you can have, like, even Tsunami looks a little bit more abstract, so it still has more of like an Asian style of artwork kind of vibe to it. Like, even though it's kind of hard to go too conceptual on a Tsunami.
Yeah, sure.
It has so much mana in Alpha. It has Birds of Paradise, Llanowar Elves, Ley Druid, Mana Bond, Channel, Wild Growth, like lots of mana. I don't think
and some of the mainstays. I mean, Birds of Paradise and Llanowar Elves are still used to this day in every format. You know,
yeah. I mean, it has lots of creature abilities. So it has Cockatrice and Thicket Basilisk, which both have essentially Death Touch. Back in Alpha, it was written that any non-wall creature blocking it is destroyed at the end of combat. With that, it was non-wall. Obviously, you can't give Death Touch to a wall because it's made out of bricks.
Put some spikes on it.
Well, obviously, the other problem is it's like quite a few. There's walls in every. Again, with
I just solved the problem. Put some spikes on
it. Well, I mean, there is literally in this wall of brambles. So
spiky wall.
Yeah, spiky wall, but it regenerates though, so that gets around it anyway.
Give it Death Touch.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, great, awesome, fantastic.
Sold.
It also has like Instill Energy, Instill Energy, which is like a haste kind of giver to green, which is interesting. I mean, it does. We didn't say this before, but it does get haste in small quantities.
Sure,
it's a tertiary evergreen ability for it. And then it also has, weirdly enough, and this is something that's interesting to talk about in terms of archers. So it has an archer in the set, Elvish Archer. Now, normally you would think, without a doubt, it's going to have reach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it has first strike.
Elvish Archer has first strike?
Yeah, so it's a creature in green that has first strike.
Right.
And I guess the idea being that if you've got a sword and you're charging at someone who's got a bow and arrow, that bow and arrow is going to hit you before the sword hits you.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I guess that's fair.
Because I guess that's the way they interpreted it. Because they do have reach in this in Alpha as well, having a giant spider being in the set.
The one and
having web being in the set as well, giving a creature the ability to be able to block creatures with flying. So it's funny that they obviously at some point realised that archers probably should have focused more in the destroying things or dealing damage to things with flying or having reach rather than having first strike. But it's funny that in their initial concept of the game that worked for them and it made sense, which I think is true. Script Sprites is a weird one as well. It's a 1 mana 1/1 flying, which you wouldn't normally get
in green.
Yeah, in green.
Sure,
yeah.
Okay.
Being fairies as well. So the first fairy was actually in green.
Yeah,
which is really
I
strange,
kind of suppose. I suppose because in Alpha, when we spoke about Alpha with Blue, they did have creatures, but they were usually these kind of big, sort of drawbacky creatures.
Yeah, or they had like the blue creatures tend to be a bit more conceptual, and also blue wasn't the colour mana curving.
Exactly. So I suppose a fairy back in alpha would be considered more green.
Yeah, and also naturally having flying shouldn't be. Like if a bird, say if you had a bird, I know most birds are now in blue or white. Like why is that? Why can't you have birds in green? Like why do things? It's almost like in the same way that why does weather things have to be affiliated with blue just because it's the color of like the sea?
Yeah.
In the same way, there's a card in alpha, tsunami.
I suppose it's a flip round though. What other colours would fit so well with things like spiders having reach?
Yeah.
And archers having reach.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess they kind of have to pigeonhole a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean they do have in alpha as well, obviously, because every colour had walls. Also, every colour had land destruction. So as much as you had stone rain for 2 and a red in red, and you had black sinkhole in black, you also have icy winds.
Okay.
Oh, icy bloods. One second. Let me scroll up quickly. Ice storm. So 2 and a green, destroy target land. So basically a functional reprint of stone rain, but in green.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know why in every colour it had tsunami. So this is when I thought it had boil in the set, the destroy all islands in red. No, it's tsunami, destroy all islands in green. So fun times for blue. Blue doesn't get a good time ever. I mean, that's a lie. It dominated for years and years and years. But the fact that it uses natural things like ice. This is something I put at the bottom. Like why? Like Wall of Ice is a card in there as well. So you've got Wall of Ice, Ice Storm, Tsunami. These are all things that you would think to be very blue.
Sure.
And obviously the whole point is nature in general is supposed to be green. Like if you look at Tarkir, as much as it's the ice part of Temur, the Temur clan.
Yeah, they're up in the Snow Mountains.
They might be in the Snow Mountains, but that is the greenest clan in my mind by far, because it's the Ataka clan, and the Ataka clan's about natural selection and progression.
It's green with blue and
survival
red,
of the fittest kind of thing. And I do agree to a certain extent that if you are looking at nature, an ice storm or a tsunami would be a green thing because it's a natural occurrence.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, if you're causing, like, I guess that at that point you have to question, like, what manner are you tapping into to make the thing happen?
Yeah, so if ice and snow are made from water,
so it doesn't necessarily
water is the blue mana.
Yeah, and so because of the way that naturally magic's progressed and the way we look at it, it is supposed to be, a blue thing because it's a water droplet. So I can see why, but it's funny that in the initial inception of the game, things like these natural things like Wall of Ice was considered to be a green card because it's a natural occurrence. Exactly.
But I think for the most part, it seems to be that Alpha definitely has, although there were a few outliers like there were with every colour pairing, or every colour, in Alpha, green definitely seems to be the one that's carried on its tropes probably the most solidly from the initial set, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like that's this idea of having creatures that are pretty decent up the curve all the way. It's had the equal biggest creature in the set, with Lord of the Pit having Force of Nature, which was the big badass creature of Alpha, which was 2 green for an 8/8 trample, and you have to pay green and during your upkeep to keep it in play. Very still. I mean, they had a lot of these effects. So black had the pay life or sacrifice creatures or whatever to keep your demon untapped and attacking, whereas green required you to keep putting the mana back into it again. This idea that it takes it takes a mana investment to keep a creature in play.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. I mean, yeah, green seems to be definitely one of the most sort of like stable colours in the game.
Yeah.
All right, so what we've done for the rest of the colours then is that we've kind of at the end of each episode rounded off what we'd want to see from the colour in the future, either thematically or maybe mechanically, where we want to see the colour go. I mean, what would you want to see green doing? Do you think it needs to change?
I think this is fine because we talked about this a little bit earlier, where we said that going into this, it's funny because we started with white and we've ended in green, and typically white was the colour that has a fair few hang-ups that needs to be kind of picked up a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Or at least some deliberate action kind of taken to kind of expand it mechanically or at least let it keep up. Whereas green's the colour that's kind of got a little bit of everything. I don't in the opposite fashion, it's doing pretty well across competitive formats. It might not be the best colour in Magic, like quote unquote. But at the same time, I don't think it's struggling at all. Like all you have to do is look at things like Theros Beyond Death, where you have 1 green, 2/3 enchantment creature in green, gives all of your enchantments and creatures encounter ability.
Dryad of the Elysian Grove, fixes all of your mana.
Yeah. Well, that's the rare. The other one's the uncommon. The 2/3 uncommon for 2 mana. So the comparison there is that green's already above curve, and if creatures and creature combat, which have been getting more prevalent are going to be prevalent going forwards. I think green not only caught up, I think it's now going to have to, it can drag its heels a little bit. Like there was a time where green had nothing and white kind of had a little bit of everything. We're kind of in the opposite thing. So I think it's a pendulum kind of swing.
Sure.
I don't think green has a problem.
Well, I mean, this is what I want to see from green going forwards. I actually want to see them put green more in a box. So if we consider that Commander is pretty much being acknowledged at the moment by Wizards of the Coast as being the most popular format.
Yeah.
And you can see that in their card choices. I don't think it's debatable at this point. I also don't think it's a problem.
Nyxborn Ancient, Nyxbloom Ancient.
Nyxbloom Ancient. This is my point. So if you look at the last few sets, or even just the last two, where you have the Great Henge, you have Nyxbloom Ancient from this most recent set, and Dryad of the Elysian Grove, and you have things like the Guardian Project coming out of Ravnica. All these big green spells are just running away with what green can do.
Yeah.
Now, I don't necessarily think it's like this big hullabaloo that everyone thinks it is. There are plenty of like commander metas and plenty of commander pods that don't run green. If you step back from a lot of what kind of the larger world meta is trying to scream in your face, green isn't necessarily the be all and end all of this format.
Well, CDH tends not to have.
Well, this doesn't
green
even. Yeah, it plays blue, right?
Yeah, it's mostly.
So
like
I
blue.
don't think it's as much of a problem as maybe people think it is, but there is no denying that green is being pushed. So I want to see them put it more in a box. Yeah. Maybe start taking away the enchantment synergies, giving it to white. And just things like that. Another thing I'd like to see green do thematically is that we mentioned this earlier, and I could be wrong, but I can't remember a green faction in a plane or in a set which were just purely the antagonists.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't tend to, like, we've seen bad white characters with, funny enough, red is probably the only other colour that doesn't really get them that much.
Sure.
But you don't see the bad side of green very much. So I would quite like to
see in a future set a green faction be the antagonists or be the oppressors in some way.
Well, this is what we talked about. I mean, I have no idea what the courier is at all, but I doubt it's going to be this. But this is something we talked about when we were talking about the Black episode, that it would be interesting to see that it's the civilizations that are trying to survive against the behemoths that are kind of mutating and overtaking. Because I'm going to assume mutates in the set because of the unsanctioned.
Well, they released the WPN key artwork for a courier, and it does have Vivian Reed, who's the Planeswalker in the artwork, and so she, I can't imagine she's going to be on the bad side. Well, no, but this is the thing. A lot of Vivian's characterization throughout the very little that we've seen of her really does seem to have her be a little bit more like Garrick, where their morality, as we've spoken about with Green, isn't good or bad. It's what suits their idea of what is natural,
which can sometimes rub people up the wrong way.
Can be antagonistic. Yeah. You know, if we have a society of peace-loving people, but they're very much a sort of manufactured society, and then comes this green planeswalker with her giant mutated mongooses smashing everything to shit.
I'm just imagining her like trapping one of these giant behemoths, like island-sized behemoths, in a bow, and then she just fires an arrow.
Fires it off.
Skyscraper-sized behemoth just comes at you across the main
So I think this is an interesting idea, and that's why I'd like to see green.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think green has any problems. And as we know in the modern world, there's nothing. The world needs to go green. It needs to be a greener place.
Sure, unless they take away my axes.
The white civilizations of Earth
of the cities
are ruining. God damn you, blue.
Cool. And with that, we're going to finish off our Colour Pie episodes, guys. Thank you very much for listening to all 5 of our Colour Pie episodes. We will swing back to these colours at some point, and we'll definitely be doing things like colour pairs.
Yeah, that'd be quite interesting.
All that kind of thing. Yeah. But for now, guys, please follow us on Twitter. You can find us at mtflavouring. You can find myself at Andy Manface. Andy Manface. Nathan, when they can find you?
At the Fox in the Moon.
At the Fox in the Moon. If you have a piece of green flavour that you think we haven't touched on, if you have a favourite green card that we didn't touch on, because we almost forgot to talk about Nyxbloom Ancient there at the very end, do hit us up on Twitter and do let us know. We want to see as many of you kind of following us and supporting us as possible, because then we get to produce the content which you want to hear. So it is a symbiotic relationship. Yeah. Which is a very natural thing. Yes, you got there in the end. Beautiful. Other than that, guys, please like and share this podcast around with your friends. All the good stuff. Get someone who isn't a Vorthos into being a Vorthos, because I think it really does enhance their Magic experience. And other than that, guys, as always, thank you very much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
See you soon.